Washington state's 9.9% tax on millionaires doesn't go into effect until 2028, but the state is already paying the price. A new survey found that nearly half of Washington business leaders are already considering moving their personal residence out of the state. But even as companies and high earners look for the exits, Seattle's mayor says the wealth exodus is all made up.
Imagine this. You spend more than 3 decades helping build one of Seattle's greatest success stories. You create thousands of high-paying jobs. You help transform an entire industry. You help turn Seattle into one of America's most powerful tech hubs. And then one day, after everything you've contributed, you decide it's time to leave. So how does the city's new socialist mayor respond? Not with concern, not with gratitude, not with a plan to stop more businesses from leaving. She simply smiles, waves, and says one word: goodbye.
You know, the ones that leave, like, bye.
And that's when I realized this story isn't really about Rich Barton. It's about what Seattle is becoming. Because this week, Rich Barton, billionaire co-founder of Zillow and one of the city's most influential entrepreneurs, officially declared himself a resident of Las Vegas after decades of building businesses in Seattle. This is the man who helped revolutionize the housing industry, built Zillow into a multi-billion-dollar company, and helped create thousands of high-paying jobs. Publicly, Barton called the move a new chapter in his life. His departure comes as Washington politicians push some of the most aggressive tax increases on high-income earners in state history. And now a growing number of residents are asking the same question. If one of Seattle's most successful entrepreneurs is leaving, who's next? Today, we're breaking down Barton's departure, Mayor Katie Wilson's reaction, and why many business leaders see this as another warning sign for Seattle's economic future. Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. Leave your city and state in the comments below. Rich Barton's story in Seattle is the ultimate American success tale. Back in 1994, fresh out of his late 20s, he launched Expedia inside Microsoft, a revolutionary idea that let everyday people book their own flights and hotels online. By 1999, he took the company public. After a brief sabbatical, he returned to Seattle in 2004 and co-founded Zillow with Lloyd Frank in December of that year, starting with just 20 employees in a downtown office. What began as a scrappy startup quickly became a juggernaut. Zillow launched publicly in February 2006, introducing the now famous Zestimate, a tool that gave millions of Americans their first transparent look at home values. It completely democratized real estate data that had once been locked away with agents. Over the next 2 decades, Zillow transformed from a simple listing site into a full ecosystem: buying, selling, renting, financing, and even iBuying homes. By 2024 to 2025, Zillow Group employed over 6,800 people nationwide, with Seattle remaining its headquarters and largest hub, supporting roughly 1,200 to 1,500 local employees at its peak. The company generated $2.24 billion in revenue in 2024 and built a market value that has reached billions. Its presence fueled an entire ecosystem: real estate agents, tech talent, restaurants, and service businesses that thrived on the daily foot traffic of high-earning professionals. For more than 35 years, Rich Barton poured his energy into Seattle. He didn't just build companies, he helped build the city's modern identity as a tech and innovation hub alongside giants like Amazon. Zillow didn't just create jobs, it reshaped how Americans think about the single biggest purchase of their lives, while pumping hundreds of millions of dollars in salaries, taxes, and economic activity straight into the Pacific Northwest every single year. This was a man who bet everything on Seattle, until the city started betting against people like him. Publicly, Rich Barton kept it classy and personal. In his brief announcement on X, he simply said, "Officially a Las Vegas resident. Kids are launched, empty nest achieved, and we're excited to start this next chapter." No drama, no complaints, just the warm language of a man turning the page after raising a family in the city that made him. But the timing tells a far more urgent story. Barton's move came just days after Washington lawmakers pushed through aggressive new tax measures targeting high earners. In 2021, the state introduced a 7% capital gains tax on long-term gains above roughly $250,000 to $278,000. The Washington Supreme Court upheld it in 2023. Then, beginning in tax year 2025, lawmakers added a surtax, creating a new top rate of 9.9% on capital gains exceeding $1 million. On top of that, in March 2026, they passed a groundbreaking 9.9% income tax on all personal income above $1 million per household, set to take full effect for the 2028 tax year. For someone with Barton's wealth, a billionaire whose net worth hovers around $1.2 to $2.1 billion, largely tied to millions of Zillow shares, these changes aren't abstract policy, they're a direct hit. Every major stock sale or liquidity event now carries a massive state tax bill that simply doesn't exist in Nevada. Nevada has no state income tax, no capital gains tax, no estate tax. One address change could save a high net worth individual like Barton hundreds of millions of dollars over the coming decade, especially as he and other founders look to diversify holdings or realize gains after years of building. This isn't the first signal. Jeff Bezos quietly shifted residency to Miami years earlier. Howard Schultz announced his departure to Florida on the very same day the millionaire income tax bill passed after a record 25-hour debate. Now Rich Barton joins the list. The pattern is unmistakable. Washington's strategy of repeatedly raising the tax burden on its most successful residents isn't just failing to deliver stable revenue, it's actively accelerating the exodus. And while politicians celebrate short-term collections, the long-term economic engine that people like Barton built over 35 years is quietly being relocated elsewhere. And right in the middle of this accelerating exodus, Seattle's new Democratic Socialist mayor, Katie Wilson, delivered a moment that perfectly captured the disconnect. When directly asked about the growing number of wealthy residents and business leaders leaving Washington, including high-profile departures like Rich Barton, Mayor Wilson didn't offer concern, a policy rethink, or even a neutral response. Instead, she laughed on camera, waved her hand dismissively, and said the now infamous words, the mayor of the city that Rich Barton helped transform into a tech and innovation hub, essentially waved goodbye to the very people whose companies power its economy. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. This came from a self-described Democratic Socialist who defeated the previous mayor by running on aggressive progressive policies. The same mayor who has proudly joined Starbucks picket lines and once encouraged residents not to support the company founded by another longtime Seattle icon who also left for Florida. While Zillow's co-founder quietly relocates to Las Vegas, taking decades of institutional knowledge and influence with him, the city's top elected official treats the loss like a joke. No plan to retain talent, no strategy to replace the economic activity, just laughter and a casual wave. This single clip isn't just tone-deaf, it's chilling. It reveals a leadership philosophy that views successful entrepreneurs and job creators not as partners to be protected, but as disposable cash machines. When the builders start leaving and the response from City Hall is, bye, you know the warning lights aren't just flashing anymore, they're blazing red. In the days following her viral comment, group chats lit up, private Slack channels exploded, and the long silent class of Seattle founders and venture capitalists began speaking out publicly, many for the first time. What had been whispered frustrations suddenly turned into open revolt. Prominent voices in the tech world pushed back hard. Former Democratic State Senator Reuven Carlyle openly criticized the mayor's dismissive attitude. Tech leaders warned that this wasn't just one tone-deaf moment, it was the final straw. AI startup founder Jesse Proudman of Venice.ai went public, saying he and many others were already looking at houses out of state. It's just not a friendly jurisdiction to be in when you're villainized for being an entrepreneur here. He wasn't alone. Multiple Seattle tech executives told reporters that everybody I know is processing an exit. The anger runs deeper than one clip. A February 2026 survey by the Association of Washington Business revealed that 17% of businesses are actively planning to leave the state due to rising taxes, a sharp jump from the previous year. Downtown Seattle's office vacancy rate has already hit a staggering 35.6%, one of the worst in the nation, as high earners and companies reduce their footprints. For decades, these founders stayed quiet. They tolerated the traffic, the homelessness, the rising costs, because they believed in the city they helped build. Rich Barton's quiet departure to Las Vegas, coming right after the new 9.9% income tax, broke the dam. Suddenly, people who once feared being canceled for speaking up started posting on X and LinkedIn. We built this city, now we're being shown the door. The message from the tech community is unmistakable. We're not the villains. We're the ones who create the jobs, the revenue, and the innovation that pays for everything else. When even lifelong Seattle builders start packing up, it's no longer overblown. It's a warning, and City Hall just waved goodbye to all of it. But the real damage isn't limited to one billionaire founder packing his bags for Las Vegas. When leaders like Rich Barton leave, the shockwaves spread far beyond any single stock sale or personal tax savings. Zillow still maintains its headquarters in downtown Seattle, but the company has been steadily shrinking its physical footprint for years. Back in 2022, it subleased more than half its headquarters space amid earlier layoffs. In January 2026, Zillow cut another 200 employees, about 2% of its workforce, in performance-related reductions that hit its Seattle operations. These aren't abstract numbers. Every high-earning tech worker who relocates or whose job is moved elsewhere means fewer customers for the restaurants, coffee shops, dry cleaners, and gyms that once thrived on Zillow's daily foot traffic. Downtown Seattle's office vacancy rate tells the brutal story. By the end of 2025 and into early 2026, it hit record highs between 33% and 35.6%, among the worst of any major U.S. city. The Downtown Seattle Association has directly linked this crisis to aggressive tax policies and the resulting loss of high-income professionals. When companies like Zillow reduce their Seattle presence, entire blocks of small businesses feel the pain immediately, while the city's tax base quietly erodes. And these effects go deeper than visible layoffs. Business relocation attorneys report a surge in calls from Washington companies exploring moves out of state. Startup founders and venture capitalists quietly admit they're thinking twice about planting new roots in a place ranked near the bottom in business tax competitiveness. The businesses that never arrive, the jobs that are never created here, are invisible on any spreadsheet, but they represent the future Seattle is losing. This isn't just about Zillow. It's the same pattern that followed Amazon's major cuts, Starbucks' expansion into Nashville instead of Seattle, and countless smaller firms shifting operations eastward or to low-tax states. The high earners leave first, then the supporting ecosystem shrinks. Then the tax revenue projections that politicians counted on start falling short. The very people the new taxes were supposed to squeeze are proving they have options. And the city left behind is discovering that wealth is far more mobile than lawmakers ever planned for. Now, let's be honest for a second. No one disputes that Seattle faces real challenges. Sky-high housing costs have pushed working families to the brink. Homelessness remains visible on too many streets. Schools and public services are strained. These are serious problems that deserve serious solutions. But here's the question Seattle's leadership refuses to answer. How do you fund those solutions by driving away the very people who generate the revenue in the first place? The capital gains tax was supposed to bring in steady money for education and early childhood programs. In its first full year, it overperformed, pulling in over $800 million. Lawmakers cheered. Then reality hit. By the second year, collections dropped sharply to around $430 million as wealthy residents deferred sales, restructured deals, or simply left. One high-profile move like Rich Barton's can wipe out enormous projected revenue that never gets replaced. This is the fatal flaw in the tax the rich playbook. Wealth is mobile, talent is mobile, companies are mobile. When you make it expensive and hostile to stay, people vote with their feet. Florida, Nevada, and Texas don't have state income taxes or capital gains taxes. They're not begging businesses to come. Businesses are flooding in. Meanwhile, Seattle's downtown continues to hollow out, office towers sit empty, and small businesses that relied on Zillow and Amazon employees close their doors. The pattern is now painfully familiar. New York, under similar progressive leadership, is watching the same exodus. California has lost hundreds of thousands of residents and countless companies to lower tax states. Connecticut and New Jersey learned this lesson the hard way years ago. You cannot build a stable tax base on people who have the resources and mobility to leave, and then act shocked when they do. Every time a founder like Barton relocates, it's not just lost personal taxes, it's lost future jobs, lost innovation, lost economic momentum, the invisible damage, the startups that never choose Seattle, the expansions that go to Nashville or Las Vegas instead, compounds year after year. Politicians promise fairness and compassion, but the math doesn't care about intentions. When the golden goose flies away, the golden eggs stop coming. Rich Barton arrived in the Pacific Northwest decades ago with big ideas and built not just Zillow, but part of Seattle's identity as a place where innovation could flourish. He created thousands of jobs, empowered millions of homeowners, and poured decades of his life into the city. Then, quietly and without fanfare, he chose Las Vegas as his new home. This isn't just one man's decision, it's the latest chapter in a clear pattern. A city turning against the very people who made it successful. When leaders treat job creators as enemies instead of partners, the result is predictable. The builders leave, the momentum fades, and the people left behind pay the real price. The lesson for Seattle, and every city watching, is simple but urgent. You cannot build a thriving tax base on people who are fully capable of leaving. Wealth doesn't stand still. Talent doesn't stay where it's punished. So here's the question for you. Are you in Seattle or Washington right now, watching businesses and talent drain away in real time? Or do you believe these aggressive tax policies are the right path forward despite the mounting evidence? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this video opened your eyes, hit that like button, subscribe for more unfiltered deep dives, and turn on notifications. Share it with anyone who still believes cities can tax their way to prosperity. Stay sharp, follow the money, and I'll see you in the next one.